On my wedding day, my wife stood on the rooftop in a pristine white wedding gown, crying as she asked, "If I die, do you think those who hurt me will feel guilty?" I replied, "They won't feel guilty, but I'll make them pay. I'll ensure that each one of them joins you in the grave. If you still love me, don't jump, and I'll take care of you for the rest of your life." She wiped away her tears and managed a faint smile. "I'm sorry, but I can't hold on any longer," she said. "Every day I live, I just want to die." My heart sank as I looked at her. I loved her, but if she jumped, I could understand her pain. Chapter 1. That day, I went with my wife to try on wedding dresses. The first dress she tried on was already stunning, and just looking at her made my heart race. If there hadn't been a crowd in the store, I would have hugged and kissed her right there. She shyly asked me if she looked good. Just then, a little boy, accompanied by an adult, overheard her and mischievously shouted, "Wow, so ugly!" My wife became upset, so I quickly praised her, saying she was as beautiful as a princess, and that she shouldn't mind the child's nonsense. Only then did she cheer up and say to me, "Aren't you going to buy a milk tea for your princess? It's so hot in this dress." I foolishly agreed, running off to get her milk tea. That was the moment I ruined her life. When I returned with the milk tea, I saw a crowd gathered at the entrance of the bridal shop. Many people were recording with their phones, wondering what was happening. I pushed through the crowd and saw my wife lying on the ground, disheveled. The girl I always pampered like a princess was being pinned down by a woman, and the little boy from before was next to her, about to slap her. As his slap landed on my wife's face, the woman praised him, saying, "Good job, baby! Hit her back!" My wife couldn't defend herself. She could only cover her chest with her hands, crying and begging, "Please, don't film me! Please don't film me!" But the bystanders, relishing the drama, kept their phones aimed at her. I lost control, grabbed a nearby phone, and smashed it to pieces. Then I rushed into the store, pushed the woman aside, and pulled my wife into my arms. She trembled, clutching my clothes tightly, and burst into tears. Seeing her like this broke my heart. I quickly took off my jacket to cover her and asked what had happened. She could only cry and tremble, too shaken to speak. Finally, it was the bridal shop assistant who explained what had occurred. After I left, my wife had removed the first dress to try on a second one. The boy's aunt, who was also there trying on wedding dresses, was getting her makeup done while her mother chatted with her. No one was watching the child, who played freely in the store. The child pulled open the curtain of the fitting area, which is typically used for better lighting. When the curtain was opened, everyone in the store saw my wife undressed. She was both ashamed and furious and instinctively slapped the child. The child's parents were enraged, accusing her of being shameless for hitting their son. They rushed at her, pinned her down, and encouraged their child to hit back. To prevent my wife from defending herself, the woman deliberately tore at my wife's clothes, exploiting her shame while committing the most outrageous acts. Chapter 2. The pain in my heart kept growing as I held her, truly aching for her. As a man, how could I bear to see the girl I love be humiliated and beaten? Just imagining what she had just gone through made it hard for me to breathe. The shopkeeper had already called the police, and they arrived quickly. The woman screamed and cried to the officers, claiming she was taking her child to the hospital for a checkup, and that she would not spare us if the child had been hurt. A police officer came to ask us what had happened, but my wife was still trembling in my arms, unable to say a word. Seeing her like this terrified me, so I told the officer, "Can you take my wife to the hospital first? She doesn't look well." The woman immediately shouted, "What a pretentious act! All delicate and disgusting. When I breastfed my child, I didn't care if people saw. What kind of woman acts like this?" I was furious, wanting to rip her tongue out, but my mind was filled with worry for my wife's safety. Ignoring the police nearby, I held her and walked straight to the police car, asking them to take us to the hospital. At the hospital, the police told me this could likely be considered mutual assault, but they would have to wait for the injury report to confirm. I asked my wife to see the doctor, but she was shaking so badly that she couldn't walk, so I ended up carrying her into the examination room. The doctor began examining her, but soon he frowned and asked me to step out. I had no choice but to leave, filled with anxiety. The little boy soon came out, and it turned out his injuries weren't even minor. He ran to his mother, covering his face and crying in pain. The woman glared at me viciously, hugging her child, and kept comforting him, saying, "Don't be afraid. My dear, if anyone bullies you again, we'll fight back," I said, clenching my fists tightly and biting my nails, praying that everything would be all right. After a while, the door opened, and the doctor emerged, but my wife was still inside. He explained the situation was complicated. She was experiencing palpitations and shortness of breath, and her mental state was unstable. "I've arranged for an ambulance to transfer her to the central hospital. She might have post-traumatic stress disorder," he added. I was stunned, and the woman seemed just as shocked. She anxiously muttered, "Am I the only one who thinks she's exaggerating? In this day and age, what's wrong with being seen a little? She was even wearing nipple covers. If she's so old-fashioned that this little thing causes mental illness, she shouldn't be out in public causing trouble for others." Chapter 3. She didn't finish her sentence because I rushed over, grabbed her hair, and dragged her into the restroom. The nearby police saw the commotion and quickly tried to intervene, but I swiftly shut the door. Since the child was in her arms, he was also pulled along into the restroom. There were frantic knocks on the door, and she nervously asked, "What are you going to do? Are you going to hit me in front of the police?" I punched her in the stomach, causing her to collapse in pain. She screamed, "Help! Police! He's hitting me!" I yanked her by the hair and dragged her to a stall. The little boy fell to the floor, crying and trying to hit me with his tiny fists. "Let go of my mom!" he cried. I coldly replied, "Then don't close your eyes. Watch your mom." I pulled the woman by the hair and opened the stall door. In panic, she asked, "What are you going to do?" I answered, "Teach you a lesson." I shoved her head into the toilet bowl, making her face flush, and she began vomiting violently. I pressed her head down and flushed the toilet. "Your mouth is so dirty. Let me help you clean it," I shouted angrily. She tried to struggle, but I pushed her back down. She wanted to vomit, but I forced her to swallow it. The child continued to cry in fear, shouting, "Batman, you're a Batman!" I turned to him and said, "Yes, I'm a bad man. Good boy. Watch closely and remember this bad man's face." The woman was convulsing, and just then, the police broke open the door. I raised my hands and said coldly, "I won't resist. Please take my wife to a big hospital, and if this woman is scared too, it's because she's too weak-minded. Please make sure she doesn't harm others in the future." I was taken to the police station, where I told the officers I was willing to face punishment for hitting the woman. But she had to pay for what she had done to my wife. However, life isn't a drama, and justice doesn't always come. The woman was detained for just 1 day due to her 2 children at home and the fact that she was breastfeeding. She was quickly released. We wanted to press criminal charges, but the police said my wife wasn't physically injured, so it couldn't be pursued criminally. As for post-traumatic stress disorder, it didn't meet the threshold for minor injuries. Unwilling to accept this, I took my wife to consult a lawyer. The lawyer told us that in such cases, we could only file for civil compensation. He advised us to let it go. I angrily asked if we could sue for defamation, something I had read about online. The lawyer shook his head and explained that the law has special considerations for breastfeeding women, making it nearly impossible to imprison her. Even if we managed to sue, she would likely receive probation or bail. When we left the lawyer's office, my wife remained silent, tears streaming down her face. I hugged her tightly as she cried uncontrollably in my arms. She asked, "Why do bad people never get punished?" I had no answer. For some, paying a bit of money is punishment enough, but to us, the cost of committing a crime was far too low. Chapter 4. I refused to believe in such evil. I wouldn't let my girl suffer this fate. I tried contacting several more lawyers and even reached out to the court. But in the end, everyone told us that the best we could do was pursue a civil lawsuit. My wife's mental state was deteriorating. She struggled to sleep at night, and even when she did, nightmares would wake her, causing her to tremble in my arms. She cried and told me that living in this world felt exhausting, that every time she closed her eyes, painful memories came rushing back. The psychologist advised us to keep her engaged in activities that gave her a sense of accomplishment, and to avoid idleness, as it would only make things worse. As our wedding date approached, whenever she was feeling down, she would immerse herself in wedding preparations, hoping to forget the pain through busyness. She'd temporarily forget her sorrow while happily choosing flowers, booking dishes, and even designing the wedding entrance herself. But life is not a drama. It relentlessly drives good people to despair. As our wedding day drew near, my in-laws suddenly called us back home. When my mother-in-law saw me, she handed me a large red envelope. I opened it and found it full of cash. "This is the 50,000 yuan betrayal gift your family gave us earlier," my mother-in-law said. "I'm returning everything to you today, plus an additional 30,000 yuan as compensation." I didn't quite understand what this meant. She sighed deeply and explained that she hoped we would cancel the wedding. My wife was shocked. After all, she had been busy planning the wedding for days, only to be told now that it should be called off. My father-in-law suddenly took out his phone and placed it on the coffee table. I glanced at the screen. It was a video posted in their neighborhood chat group. The footage showed my wife being stripped and beaten at the bridal shop earlier. In the video, my wife was covering herself, begging them not to film, but they ignored her pleas, capturing her most humiliating moment. Not only did this person post the video, but they also fabricated a story in the group chat, saying that my wife had caused a scene at the bridal shop on Chuano Road. According to the post, the mistress and her men were taking wedding photos when the wife showed up, stripped them, and the child got so angry that he hit the mistress. My wife and I were stunned. The situation was clearly not as described, but the fabricated story made the video seem much more plausible. The person who posted it was emotional, including a crying emoji, and claimed, "Even a small child knows to defend his mother. This woman is truly a filthy vixen. Share this and expose the wench. It's everyone's responsibility." The chat group went wild, with people cursing and insulting my wife, blindly believing what they read without thinking for themselves. I scrolled through the phone but didn't see any response from my in-laws. I asked my mother-in-law, "Why didn't you clarify this?" She replied, "I can't clarify it. Fortunately, you were wearing bridal makeup that day, so the neighbors didn't recognize you. As long as I don't speak up, they won't know it's my daughter." Chapter 5. My wife stared blankly at my mother-in-law, trembling as she spoke. "Mom, are you just going to let them make up lies so they don't know it's your daughter?" My mother-in-law said, "I'm doing this for your own good. Things have escalated to this point. You shouldn't go through with the wedding, it's too embarrassing." My wife interrupted her, crying, "Mom, I'm not dirty. Why shouldn't I get married? Do you think I don't want my daughter to get married?" She continued, "Use your brain. If you get married and wear your bridal makeup, everyone will recognize you from the video. Do you think your wedding will be happy? Do you think people will bless you? Or will they secretly laugh at you? I'm doing this for your own good. Why don't you understand?" My wife couldn't respond, and we both understood what my mother-in-law meant. Even if we could clear her name, once the wedding took place, my wife would inevitably become the subject of ridicule. These past few days, my wife's mood had been improving slightly, but she finally couldn't take it anymore. She ran into the bedroom and slammed the door. Moments later, I heard her heart-wrenching cries from inside. "Why am I the only one who gets hurt? I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I the only one suffering?" Hearing her cries felt like a knife to my heart. She had done nothing wrong. Why should she bear all this pain? We were now faced with the most painful decision: swallow our pride, live under the shadow of slander, hide our lives, and bear the false accusations to maintain peace, or speak out for the truth, which would expose my wife to public gossip and whispers for the next decade. Even something as simple as taking out the trash would lead to judgment. No matter which path we chose, we were the only ones who would suffer. I tried to open the door, wanting to hold her, but it was locked from the inside. "Baby, can you let me in?" I called. She cried uncontrollably, telling me that she had always thought she would marry me. She had saved for years to buy herself a big diamond ring, saved 3 years' worth of bonuses to buy an Audi as part of her dowry. She dreamed of sitting in our little car, wearing her wedding dress, and having me place the wedding ring on her finger. She had endured so much, all for the dream of a wedding. Now, everyone was telling her, "You did nothing wrong, but you can't have your dream." Tears filled my eyes as I said, "Megan, we can get married if you want. I'll have the wedding with you. I don't care about people's ridicule. I only want you in my life." She cried and told me that the wedding could never be happy now. Just like her parents had said, once she appeared in her bridal makeup, it would only bring ridicule. I said nothing more. I just thought of two people, the woman who had stripped her. I didn't know her address, but I remembered her name. Sophia. In the neighborhood chat group, their usernames were tied to their apartment numbers. The neighbor who posted the video lived in Building 4, Unit 901. I said nothing. I just etched these people into my memory, clenching my fists and suppressing my anger. Every woman in this world has a man who loves her deeply, and for her, he would do anything. Chapter 6. I needed to find that lying neighbor. I had to make her understand that some things shouldn't be said carelessly. Since my in-laws didn't dare to clear my wife's name in the chat group, I would go find the person myself and make her admit she was wrong and had wrongfully accused an innocent person. While my wife was crying in the room, unwilling to see anyone, I went directly to Building 4, Unit 901. I knocked on the door of 901, but there was no response. I knocked a few more times, and then the door of Unit 902 opened. It was an elderly couple who looked at me puzzled and asked what I was doing. I said, I was looking for the resident of 9001 when the elderly couple, looking surprised, told me 9001 hasn't been sold yet. I was taken aback. If 9001 hadn't been sold, how could there be an owner spreading rumors in the group chat? Thinking there must have been some mistake, I decided to ask the group admin. The neighborhood chat group wasn't managed by the property management, but by the residents themselves, primarily for complaints. I knew the admin's address. She lived in Unit 503 of the same building, and the homeowners' committee meetings were always held in Unit 503. I knocked on the door, and thankfully, someone answered. A woman opened the door just a crack, peering out at me. "What do you need?" she asked. I politely said, "Hello? Are you the admin of the neighborhood chat group? I'd like to ask about someone." I made up a reason and explained that the resident of 9001 in Building 4 had borrowed money from me and then blocked me. I didn't want to make a scene in the group chat, but when I went to find her at 901, I realized the unit hasn't even been sold. The admin relaxed, fully opening the door. She explained that a woman had come to her with a rental contract, claiming to be the tenant of 901. Our chat group allows tenants to join, but she violated the rules by posting advertisements and was quickly kicked out, she said. The admin showed me the ad on her phone. It was a renovation ad. She explained that some people in the renovation business pretend to be residents to gain clients. She probably saw that 9001 hadn't been sold on the Housing Bureau's website, and then pretended to be a tenant to join the group. But who knew she would borrow money from people too? I nodded, understanding. Since the group was created by the residents, if it had been managed by the property management, her lie would have been exposed right away. I noticed the woman's phone number on the ad and called it, but I was stunned when I heard the message. "The number you have dialed is not in service." How could it be an invalid number? Did the woman make an error when she filled in the phone number? Feeling even more confused, I asked the admin, "So there's no way I can get my money back? Is there any way to find her?" The admin suddenly pointed to the ceiling. I looked up and saw a security camera. When I was running the homeowners committee, the property management caused a lot of trouble, so we installed a camera. The woman must have been recorded, but I don't know how to use it. My husband is away on a business trip, but when he gets back, I'll ask him to retrieve the footage for you. I thanked the admin profusely and left, though I felt regretful. I couldn't find the slanderer for now, but the most important thing was to comfort my wife. I had made up my mind, no matter what, I would have a wedding with her. She is the woman I love the most, and I can't let her live with any regrets. Chapter 7. The day of the wedding arrived. I put on my suit, tied my tie, and pinned a boutonniere to my lapel. I knew the wedding was canceled, but I wanted to tell my girl. I had booked the plane tickets and planned to take her to the beach. I even called a local church to find a pastor. At sunrise, I would place the wedding ring on her finger, and at sunset, we would make our vows. Even if the wedding was canceled, I wanted to tell her in front of the pastor that no matter what, sickness, health, poverty, wealth, I would be with her for life. We weren't Christians, but I would serve the Lord to give her a wedding. However, a frantic phone call shattered my plans. When I answered my mother-in-law's call and rushed to the hotel, I saw my wife standing on the rooftop, wearing her white wedding dress. My heart ached as if it were being torn apart. I could hardly breathe. I rushed to the elevator, the anxious heat making me loosen my tie. When I reached the rooftop, the door was locked. I kicked it hard, breaking the lock. I gasped for breath as I saw her standing on the edge of the roof, in her high heels, looking delicate and pitiful in the sunlight. "Baby!" I called. She turned around, her face tear-streaked and sorrowful. Crying, she asked, "If I die, will those who hurt me feel guilty?" Panic gripped me, and I said, "Don't jump. Answer me, will you?" Suddenly, panic overwhelmed me even more, making me feel hotter and hotter. I loosened the buttons of my white shirt, gasping for breath. "They won't feel guilty, but I'll make them pay. I'll make each one of them die with you. If you still love me, if you don't want me to become a killer, don't jump. I'll take care of you for the rest of my life." I pulled out the cross and showed her the plane tickets. "I'm willing to spend every future day with you." She looked at the tickets and called me a fool. She wiped away her tears and forced a smile. "I'm sorry. I can't hold on anymore. Every day I live, I just want to die." A gentle breeze blew, fluttering her hair. She spread her arms as if to embrace me, but then her body fell backward, disappearing from my sight. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My mind went completely blank, and my body trembled uncontrollably. When I ran downstairs, I saw her lying in a pool of blood, her wedding dress stained a deep red. My mother-in-law collapsed from crying on the spot. I knelt beside her, my hands shaking as I cupped her small face, calling her baby over and over, but there was no response, no breath, no pulse. I fumbled for my phone, trying to call an ambulance, when suddenly a WeChat notification popped up from the group admin. "My husband is back. I'll send you that woman's photo shortly." I ignored the message, too frantic to pay attention, and urgently called for help. The ambulance arrived quickly, and the paramedics began attending to her immediately. I knelt on the cold floor watching as they lifted her onto the stretcher. Just then, my phone vibrated. In a daze, I picked it up and saw the photo sent by the group admin. As I looked at the woman in the picture, I clenched the cross in my hand. That cruel, familiar face. It was Sophia Hudson. I should have finished what I started when I shoved her head into the toilet. My cross, now stained with blood, felt heavy in my hand. Heavenly Father, I thought, I have no chance to serve you. I am about to commit a monstrous act. Am I guilty, God? Chapter 8. I didn't know Sophia Hudson's address, but I remembered her child's school uniform from the previous incident. It had the name Chuan Road Chushin Elementary School written on it. I got into the car, tears streaming down my face, wiping them away furiously. I couldn't breathe properly, struggling to catch my breath. I sent a quick message to the group admin saying, "I accidentally left the group. Can you add me back?" Then I started the car, heading for Chushin Elementary School. Suddenly, my phone rang. I wasn't in the mood to answer, but when I saw the contact name, Sophia, I reluctantly picked up. On the other end, I heard her trembling voice. "Hello? Hello?" I waited in silence, letting her speak. Her voice quivered as she asked, "I saw photos going around on social media about someone jumping off a building. It looked familiar. Was it your wife?" Coldly, I replied, "You're the one who pretended to be from 901 and spread rumors in the group, aren't you?" She quickly responded, "Wait, it's not what you think." I asked, "Then what is it, Sophia?" She cried and explained, "There's been a huge misunderstanding. When we were at the bridal shop, I was just holding your wife down, not hurting her. After I was taken to the police station, the child fixed the phone and showed the video as evidence, showing that I wasn't hitting her. But when you smashed someone's phone, I was so angry that I secretly copied the video. Then I found out where you lived and started tormenting you with it." Sophia's voice grew frantic. "I just wanted to vent my frustration. I never meant to push anyone to the point of jumping off a building. Why is your wife always so extreme? Why does she always resort to the most extreme measures?" I interrupted. "Why are you calling now?" She said quietly, "I finish work at 8. I want to know where your wife is, so I can come talk to you afterward. I replied. First People's Hospital, then hung up the call. I didn't stop driving, heading towards Chushin Elementary School. She wanted to talk, but I had no intention of engaging. When I arrived at Chushin Elementary, I didn't even get out of the car when I saw something that made my blood boil. Sophia was rushing out of the school with her child, getting into a rideshare car and speeding off. Lies. Deception. She told me she finished work at 8, yet here she was, picking up her child early from school. It was all a lie. She was trying to run away, and if I foolishly waited at the hospital, she'd be long gone by the time I realized it. I followed her car, determined to get answers. Eventually, Sophia pulled into a long-distance bus station. We both entered the station, one after the other. She hurried to the ticket counter with her child, but the child started crying. Mom, I told you so many times I need to go to the bathroom. I can't hold it anymore. Sophia didn't immediately agree. She checked the departure times first. After confirming she had time, she reluctantly took the child to the restroom. As she carried him, his head rested on her shoulder, and the child was facing me. He saw me. His eyes widened in shock, and he shouted, Mom! The bad man is here! The bad man is here! Which bad man? Sophia turned around, confused. I acted quickly, grabbing her face with one hand and dragging her toward the restroom. Coldly, I said, Seems like we always resolve things in the restroom. Didn't get enough last time. The child fell from her arms, crying in pain. Sophia struggled, but she was no match for me. I dragged her into the restroom. The child screamed loudly, Someone help! A bad man is hurting my mom! Help! I saw the restroom was empty, so I slammed the door shut and locked it, throwing Sophia to the floor. Her face was filled with fear as she scrambled backward, desperately pleading, It's your wife who's too extreme. She's really sick in the head. My God, jumping off a building over such a small matter, I'll pay you. Is that enough? I stared coldly at her, watching as she panicked. At that moment, the restroom door was kicked hard, making a loud noise. A voice shouted from outside, Come out! Men don't hit women. We've called the police. Come out now. Chapter 9. I ignored the shouting from outside. I didn't care how long the door would hold or if the police had been called. I didn't come here to run. I came here to make Sophia pay. Sophia's face was a mask of terror as she crawled backward, but how much room could she gain in a tiny restroom? She huddled in the corner, trembling as I stepped closer, one deliberate step at a time. She cried, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Please forgive me. I coldly responded, You don't know what wrong is. Your tears and attitude now are just a disguise. You're afraid of punishment. You're crying not because you regret your actions, but because you hope I'll be a fool and let you go. Through her tears, she screamed at me, I was trying to help you. I was stunned. What help? I asked. She anxiously said, Don't you see? Your wife is mentally ill. She seeks death over the smallest things. If you stay with her, it'll only harm you. Mental illness is hereditary. Her genes will pass on to your children, ruining your life. I gasped in disbelief. You're the one who's sick. You never admit you're wrong. You always blame others for your mistakes. You cling to your victim-blaming theory, never considering the crimes you've committed. Just then, the restroom door suddenly banged loudly again. I turned to see the door being kicked open. Of course, it wasn't a security door. It couldn't hold for long. A big man stood in the entrance with the little boy hiding behind him. The fear in Sophia's face vanished instantly when she saw the men. She shouted joyfully, Husband, you're here! The man coldly replied, As soon as I got your call, I took leave and rushed here. So this was Sophia's husband. With him present, Sophia turned into a completely different person. She laughed mockingly. You think you're so tough? My husband is a bodybuilder. Keep being tough now. I remained silent, and Sophia, seeing me so quiet, grew frantic. Are you too scared to speak now? You coward! You only dare to hit innocent women. Let me tell you, I laughed so hard when I saw your wife jump off the building. She deserved it. She hit my child. It's karma. I hope she dies. I hope the hospital throws her in the morgue. Go ahead, let the judge sentence me. I asked a lawyer, even if she dies, it's just defamation. I'll get less than 3 years. That's the fairness of the law. The law doesn't protect people like her. Before she could finish, I slapped her hard across the face. She spun in a half circle, falling softly to the ground, her nose bleeding profusely. She covered her nose and screamed in pain. "Husband, he hit me!" Sophia's husband couldn't take it anymore and lunged at me. I knew I couldn't win in a physical fight. He was too strong, but I wasn't here to fight. I loosened my tie and watched him approach. When he grabbed my neck and tried to lift me, I kicked him hard in the groin. He doubled over in pain, and I clenched my fist, punching him in the throat. He could barely breathe, clutching his neck in agony. I grabbed his head, raised my knee, and smashed it into his nose with all my strength. The strong man who had been Sophia's protector collapsed instantly, vomiting a mouthful of blood, convulsing on the floor. He didn't understand. I didn't come to fight. I came to risk my life. Chapter 10. The public restroom fell into an eerie silence. Sophia was petrified, and the little boy stared at me in shock. The security guard, who had initially intended to intervene, stood frozen at the door. Suddenly, the little boy burst into tears. He ran toward me, hitting me with his tiny fists and crying, "Bad man! You hit my mom! You hit my dad!" "Yes, I am a bad man," I said calmly, crouching down to meet the child's gaze. "Remember my face. Remember what I did to your parents, and never forget it." I grabbed the little boy and threw him out of the restroom. He lay on the ground, wailing as I slowly closed the door. The security guard didn't dare to move. A 3,000 yuan monthly salary wasn't worth risking his life for. I had been worried that the door wouldn't hold much longer, but now the situation had changed. There were handrails at the restroom entrance. I dragged Sophia's husband to the handrail, and when Sophia saw what I was doing, she lunged at me. "What are you going to do to my husband?" I kicked Sophia aside and slipped her husband's arm through the handrail, wedging it into the first stall gap. Then I took off my belt and tightly secured his upper body to the handrail. After I finished, I tested the door. Every time I opened it slightly, it pressed down on Sophia's husband's arm. If I continued, his arm would break completely. This was the best lock. With everything in place, I pulled out my phone and pointed it at Sophia's face. "Confess all your wrongdoings honestly." Sophia wiped her bloody nose, trembling as she looked at the camera in terror. She had completely lost her previous arrogance. She obediently started speaking into the camera. "I am shameless. I snuck into the homeowner group and smeared others. I didn't control my child. It's all my fault," Sophia confessed to the camera. Then, in a quiet, almost pleading voice, she asked, "Can you let us go now?" I shook my head, my expression serious. "Do you know the saying, 'A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes'? Your apology might not reach everyone. The only way to make sure people see your apology is to make it compelling, something that'll grab attention." "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I mean your apology video needs something striking," I said, watching her face carefully. Sophia instinctively grabbed at her clothes, her panic growing. She screamed, "Don't even think about it!" I looked at her calmly. "You're overthinking it. I don't plan on stripping you." I kicked open the stall door beside us and pulled out the waste bin, tossing it in front of her. She froze, staring at it. I pointed the camera at her and said, "Eat it. That will get more attention than stripping." Sophia stared at the waste bin, then leaned over, starting to gag. She cried out, just kill me already." I frowned, clearly frustrated. "Am I the only one who thinks you're crazy? Overreacting to minor things and always choosing the most extreme solutions? Why do you always handle small issues in the most extreme way?" I wasn't being unreasonable, just echoing her own words. But Sophia was truly extreme. Without warning, she stood up, crying hysterically, and tried to crash her head into the wall behind her. I grabbed her and pulled her back, forcing her head into the waste bin. She struggled in pain as I coldly spoke. "Want to die? Sorry, your life isn't more important than my wife's reputation." Suddenly, the sound of sirens wailed from outside. I glanced at the time and frowned. So fast. Only a few minutes had passed. But it didn't matter. I never intended to run, nor did I plan on facing court alive. I wasn't afraid of jail, but I couldn't bear a single day without her. Chapter 11. Sophia lay on the ground, vomiting. The police quickly kicked down the door. In a moment of painful realization, Sophia's husband stirred, letting out a heart-wrenching scream. The police outside hesitated as they saw the situation, unsure of how to proceed. One officer shouted, "Don't do anything rash. Whatever issues you have, we can talk about it. Don't do anything foolish." Sophia wiped the yellow vomit from her mouth, her voice trembling as she cried out, "Police! Shoot him!" I ignored her, checking my WeChat. The group admin had already added me back to the group, and I immediately posted Sophia's video, followed by 3 large red packets. My phone began vibrating with notifications. I knew the group was in an uproar. Sophia kept crying, "Shoot him! He's right behind the door! Can't the bullets go through it?" The officer outside became increasingly anxious. "Don't provoke him! What if we accidentally hit you instead?" I spoke softly, my voice almost calm. "Don't worry. She won't die for now." "Brother, what do you want?" "I'm waiting for a call from the hospital. I'm waiting for a miracle," I whispered, holding my phone. "If my wife doesn't make it, I'll cut out her heart and see if it's black." The officer, taken aback, quickly responded, "Your wife is in the hospital? We'll help you contact the hospital. What's her name? Which hospital is she in? Is she the one who jumped off the building today?" "Yes, that's her," I replied, feeling the cold emptiness of her pulse. "I'm waiting for a miracle." "Don't worry too much," the officer reassured me. "No pulse doesn't mean no hope. We'll contact the hospital right away. Stay calm. We can discuss things later. Look, this man here is seriously injured. Let me take him to the hospital first. The sooner he gets treated, the more lenient your situation will be. You still have time. Don't make a huge mistake." I sighed, stopping my response to the voices outside. They didn't understand. If anything happened to my wife, there would be no further discussion. No matter the consequences, it wouldn't matter to me. Suddenly, a memory of the day I proposed to her resurfaced. Although she claimed she had scrimped and saved to buy herself a big diamond ring, I knew she was lying. My wife was a little miserly. On holidays, she didn't want gifts, just cash. The first cup of milk tea in autumn, 52 yuan. Valentine's Day transfer, 520 yuan. New Year's red envelope, 1,314 yuan. All these amounts held romantic meanings, but I never saw her make any large purchases. One day when she was taking a bath, I looked at her phone, not to check her messages, but simply to use it for a verification code to log into a movie membership. That's when I saw the memo titled Eternal Savings on her screen. It recorded every transfer I made, and I saw the target amount, 20,000 yuan. The tag had the exact price, 20,000 yuan. I knew then, with everyone watching, I had to propose. I got down on one knee and asked, "Will you marry me? Through sickness and health, we will be together forever." I wondered if she had used eye drops, because her tears flowed like a star in front of her friends. After saving so hard for the 20,000 yuan and spending it all, she probably couldn't help but cry. She jumped into my arms, tilted her head, and with a smile told me, "Even if I die, I'll haunt you every day." I was so foolish back then. I just held her, smiling like a complete idiot, forgetting to make her spit 3 times to ward off bad luck. Chapter 12. I had overestimated my own strength and underestimated the police. I figured they wouldn't be able to open the door easily, but all they had to do was crack it open slightly and toss in a smoke grenade. Thick smoke immediately flooded the small restroom, choking me and making it nearly impossible to see. I coughed violently, struggling to breathe. With a loud crash, the police smashed through the wall next to the door, and a second wave of officers came in with large bolt cutters, snapping the handrail at the bottom before pushing the door wide open. They shouted, "Move, now!" I was immediately pinned to the ground by officers. No matter how much I resisted, I was no match for the state machinery. They dragged me out, and Sophia cried beside the officers, accusing me of my crimes. I looked at her, and I couldn't stop myself from laughing. I laughed so hysterically, my voice echoing in the room. "The police came too soon. You're not even dead yet. I can't get a heavy sentence now," I sneered at her. "I'll keep an eye on you when I get out. I'll make sure you and your family live in fear, that you'll wake up every day dreading my early release. As long as I'm alive, you'll never sleep peacefully." Sophia looked at me, her eyes wide with terror, clutching the officer's arm. She cried, "Do you see he's insane? Shoot him!" Her terrified expression made my laughter turn even more maniacal. They handcuffed me and shoved me into the police car, but even when I was handcuffed and questioned at the station, I couldn't stop laughing. The officer taking my statement asked, "Why are you laughing? Please cooperate." I looked him in the eye and said, "I won't cooperate. I'll kill your whole family if I get out, even if I die here, even if I jump from here. I'll never cooperate." The officer sighed and walked up to me with a phone. There was a video call on the screen. I froze when I saw my wife, lying in a hospital bed, her eyes barely open. "Your wife has been saved. Cooperate, get out early, and be with her," the officer said. I stared at the video and suddenly I couldn't hold back my tears. I cried like a child. "Okay," I said, wiping my eyes. "I'll cooperate." Sophia had only minor injuries, and her husband had light wounds. By rights, I should have been sentenced to less than 3 years, but to my surprise, Sophia's family gave me a letter of forgiveness. I couldn't accept this. I couldn't pay compensation to her family, not after everything she had done. The lawyer then explained the situation to me. "From what I gathered," the lawyer said, "Sophia is terrified of you coming after her for revenge. She had planned to sell her house and move, but the property prices in her neighborhood have dropped significantly. If she sells quickly, she'll lose around 600,000 yuan. I couldn't believe it. How could she be so selfish? Did she ever think about how I feel? It's hard enough for me to even find her." The lawyer continued, "She doesn't want to lose that much money, so she's trying to make peace with you." I replied sharply, "Why should I make peace? She's not asking for medical expenses, and her video has gone viral. Everyone in the area knows about it. People stare at her when she walks by. They say, 'Look, there's the woman who ate.'" I couldn't help but laugh. "I love what they're calling her." The lawyer continued seriously, "Her reputation is ruined, and both she and her husband were injured by you. Your wife's injuries are worse, but now everyone knows she was wronged. Sophia's family wants to put this behind them and end the cycle of revenge." I was deep in thought, considering what the lawyer said. "Do it for your wife. A suspended sentence is the best option. If you push her too hard, she might lose that 600,000 yuan and send you to prison." I asked, "How much did she buy that house for?" "Reportedly, she bought it for 3 million, the lawyer said. "Got it," I replied. "I'll accept their terms." Chapter 13. I was given a suspended sentence. My old company didn't want me anymore, but as the saying goes, a tree dies standing, but a man can always find a new way. Losing my job didn't mean I couldn't make money. A government official asked about my plans, and I cautiously inquired if I could open a braised food shop. They said, "Of course, no problem. We're very supportive of people with suspended sentences working." So, I discussed it with my wife, and we rented a shop across from Chuchen Elementary School to open a braised food shop. My friends came by often to support me. Whenever school let out, they would stop by, chat, and order a braised duck neck. It was a strange coincidence, but every time they ordered one, Sophia's son would always appear at the school gate. I would immediately take the order, grab a duck neck, and head to the cutting board. "Buy a duck neck?" I'd ask. Some friends would say they didn't want one, but I'd insist, "No, you do." Then I'd raise the cleaver, glaring at the boy, and chop down hard on the duck neck with a loud thud. Sophia's son would always go pale and run away. Over time, Sophia couldn't take it anymore and called the police. She cried to the officers, "He promised he wouldn't mess with my family anymore, but he scares my child every day. My child is too scared to even go to school. I spent 3 million yuan on that school district house. We've emptied our savings." I asked in shock, "How am I scaring your child? Am I the only one who thinks you're overreacting?" "I'm just chopping braised food, officer. Look at my orders," I said, showing them the receipts, clearly proving that I was selling duck necks at that time. Sophia, desperate, replied, "You have so much braised food, but why is it every time my son comes out, you're chopping duck necks? And why do you always chop the duck neck for every customer?" I shrugged casually. "Yes, my duck necks sell well. Chopping them makes it easier to eat. Don't you sell anything else?" "We also sell beef ribs," I explained, "but those need more chopping." "Then why do you always stare at my son while chopping?" she demanded. I'm good with my knife, I said confidently. I can chop accurately without looking. Does it matter where I look? I just happened to be looking at the school gate, thinking it would be a good school for my future kids. Sophia's face turned red with anger, and she was left speechless. My wife, sensing the tension, tried to calm things down. My husband is really just selling duck necks. She's overthinking it. I felt it was absurd. What was the big deal about selling duck necks? Later, for some reason, Sophia's son refused to go to school. I felt sorry for him, and even gave him 3 bowls of rice out of pity. In the end, Sophia had to sell the house and move with her child. It was said that she lost not just 600,000 yuan, but a total of 800,000 yuan, counting the bank loans. She lost everything. Meanwhile, my braised food shop was doing well. Many people stopped by before going to drink, buying braised food as a snack or calling me for delivery. They said they respected me as a tough guy, that men should support other men and make friends. Apparently, my story had spread around, and many guys became my supporters. At night, after closing the shop, my wife clung to my arm, snuggling up to me as we walked down the street. Our new home wasn't far, and we always walked home together. I said softly, "Honey, let's close the shop for a month." She was stunned. "Why don't you want a wedding? We make over 2,000 yuan a day." I smiled and repeated, "Over 2,000 yuan a day. Our regulars are our friends now. We could hire employees." She frowned. "But if you hire employees, they'll think you've struck it rich and won't want to support you anymore. People are more afraid of their friends driving a Range Rover than not being able to drive one themselves." I hugged her tightly, feeling a bit wronged. "Okay." Suddenly she turned, pulling me into a hug. She whispered softly, "I don't want a wedding anymore. I want something else now." Curious, I asked, "What do you want?" She stood on tiptoe, kissed my lips gently, and smiled. "Guess what? What I want the most is already right in front of me." After saying that, she turned and skipped down the sidewalk in the moonlight. I watched her back, thinking hard, but I still couldn't figure out what she meant. The thing she wanted the most was right in front of her. I understood it must be the 2,000 yuan a day.